Hi everyone, this is Raphael, founder and CEO of Zendog Labs. Today we're going to talk about vision, mission, and strategy and how to go from the top level down to the operational execution level, essentially define an actionable plan. This matters for every business, whether you're a large publicly listed company or a tiny mini startup that is just getting started and trying to figure out what it's supposed to do. You need a vision, a mission, a strategy, and bring it down to the execution level. I am doing this right now for a large PLC publicly listed company. I've done this in the past for my own startups. I've done this in the past for clients. So believe me when I say having a North Star is great for your business. And in this video, we're going to cover how to do that. Before we dive too deep, let me give you a little bit of context on myself so you know who you're listening to. My name is Raphael. I'm the founder and CEO of Zendog Labs. We help startups and other types of businesses grow faster. And before starting Zendog Labs, I was a principal at a company called Roivant. We were a principal investor, meaning we raised capital for our own balance sheet and then redeployed that into a portfolio of startups. At peak, we had 35. We raised about $3 billion from SoftBank Founders Fund and other strategic and financial investors to do that, and ultimately went public on the NASDAQ in September 21, which is when I moved on. Before that, I started 2 successful startups myself. All right, let's dive right into it without further ado, from vision, mission, and strategy down to execution. And let's have a look at my slide here that I prepared for this executive team of the large publicly listed company that I was mentioning. So essentially, what I'm going to run you through is the 4 ingredients that you need. You need a vision, you need a mission, you need a strategy, and you need the enablers in place to execute on all of this. Let's stay on a high level. What are these? The vision is the why. Why are you doing the thing that you're doing? The mission is the what. Which part of your vision are you tackling first? The strategy is the how you're doing this. And by the way, this used to be in German, so let me type this up in English real quick here. And the strategy is the how you're doing this, and the enabler is the operational pieces that you need to have in place in order to be able to execute on all of this stuff. So the why, the what, and the how, and then the enablers. Let's dig one level deeper. In the vision, you're essentially trying to give yourself an answer with regard to what big and important problem you want to tackle. Let's assume you're a startup. If you're a startup, this matters because investors will be asking you for, hey, what's the problem that you're solving, or what's the opportunity that you have seen, and how big can this get, right? If your vision is insignificant, investors are not going to be interested. You may not be in the right place to even solve the problem that you're solving or address the opportunity that you're addressing, so this matters. However, the vision is usually so bold and ambitious that if you were to try to do it all at once, you're going to get lost. So you need to pick a piece of your vision that you're addressing first, and that's the mission. It's the drivers of the problem that you are addressing first in order to have something that you can realistically execute in order to not get overwhelmed. And the strategy then is addressing the question of, well, recognizing that we want to go after this driver first in order to address that vision. What is the piece? How are we actually doing that? Right? What are we doing as a business in order to deliver on our mission and on our vision and solve the underlying problem, or address the underlying opportunity that we're going after? That's the strategy, right? How do you successfully address the chosen drivers? And then enablers is a basic answer of what needs to be in place to realize the strategy, to execute the how. All right, so that's already one level deeper. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty details of how I would define each of these, let me give you an example that I put together for my own startup called Eternity. In the case of Eternity, our vision was to fight so-called non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases, also called NCDs, are diseases like mental health, cardiovascular disease, cancer. They are non-transmissible diseases that are one of the biggest problems that we have on the globe, certainly in healthcare, and certainly put a big burden on societies and the cost that this is creating. Now, that's such a big problem that while ambitious and inspirational, you wouldn't have a clue where you would want to start. So we had to take it one level deeper. And that's what we did with our mission, where we said, all right, the biggest driver of non-communicable diseases is cardiovascular disease. So let's tackle that first. We are fighting non-communicable diseases by taking on cardiovascular disease. Well, then the next question becomes, how are you actually doing that, right? It's like a baby asking how in a couple of, progressions here. And that's where the strategy came in, our strategy in this case, where we said, hey, we're going to address non-communicable diseases by fighting cardiovascular disease, the biggest driver of NCDs, by paying consumers for eating healthier. So we're going to employ a behavioral economics approach here. We're paying consumers for eating healthier. It has proven that people react to payment and incentive systems. And we're going to sponsor that entire thing by partnering with fast-moving consumer goods companies, also called FMCG companies, and using their advertising budget and refunneling that in a more productive and better way for society than you would usually do with TV ads or Instagram ads or whatever it is that FMCG would largely rely on. And then we needed certain enablers in place. In our case, we needed a consumer-facing application with a food recommendation system that's able to scan barcodes and grocery receipts, that is on the back end powered in such a way that we have the data management in place so that we can track changing nutritional information, so that we can track which campaigns we're running, so that we can track the payouts that we're performing. These are just two examples of things that we needed. There was much more that needed to be in place, right? But that's essentially how we took it. Fight NCDs by focusing on cardiovascular disease, a very addressable driver. That's the biggest one of the overarching problem, with something that we can execute against immediately, which is paying consumers for eating healthier by partnering with FMCG and then having the enablers in place like an application. Right, so that's how this works on a high level as well as through an example. Now, let's look at how I would do this again if I were to restart a business, and so kind of give you tips and tricks on how you can do it if you're looking at this and thinking, okay, thank you, Raphael, but how am I supposed to do this now? Well, on the vision level, as I say on the right, and that's what I'm focusing on right now, you want to identify an opportunity or a problem either externally or internally. What I mean by externally and internally, external means you look at the market, you look at the societies of the world, and you're identifying problems and opportunities. Internally is you ask your team, maybe you yourself have an idea that you want to solve for whatever reason because you think it's meaningful, right? And if you take the external path, there are different frameworks that you can apply to finding challenges and problems that are worth solving. One that I found useful is the PESTLA framework. It looks at what's going on in politics, what's going on in the economy, what's going on the social level, what's going on in technology and in law, and then looking at these holistically and thinking about what does this mean for my market, for my customer, what opportunities and problems arise from this, and then let me take on the most meaningful one that I know something about or feel connected to or am being told to pursue, right? And that's where we go into internal selection mechanisms, where the vision may be a function. If you are a sub of a topco, so you're a subsidiary of a holding company, let's say you are part of Nestle and you're managing one of their divisions or brands, then the guidelines are probably pretty strict around what your vision is for that brand. So there is that as an opportunity. It could also be the purpose of the company, right? Some companies, existing companies, have very strong mission-driven principles, philosophies, cultures that make it more clear what your vision should be. And then ultimately, I said this a little earlier, it's gut feeling, right? If you think there is an opportunity somewhere, if you're an experienced entrepreneur, by all means, go after it, test it ASAP, and then reverse or iterate on your strategy, right? And then how do you select the best one? Well, it's a function of you defining what you think is a valid set of criteria to make decisions here. For instance, you could be looking at what's the total size of the market, what's the addressable size of the market, what is my obtainable market share that's realistic, how fast is this market growing, right? That's the TAM, SAM, SOM, the market sizing that many VCs are like to see in pitch decks, for instance. And market growth is certainly also important, because by the time you have successfully executed on your vision and took it down to the operational level, it's probably going to take you 2 to 3 years, if not more. And so the market in 5 years from now is more important than the market size today. All right, so mission, onto the next one here. Again, most fundamentally, the way you define this is by breaking down the vision. At least it's the way I would do it, by breaking down the vision, looking at what the top drivers are, ranking those, and then picking the biggest one if you think that is worth addressing and you know how to do it. Maybe it's the second one where you feel more comfortable about, and then that's also totally fair. But you want to go after big levers, right? You want to have leverage. And so that's what this point is about. And how can you do this? Again, the selection will depend on factors that you decide and need to decide, frankly, also with your team. But it could include market size, market growth, and also market pull. This is an important one, and it's nuanced. Market pull means if you, for instance, are an existing business and you are getting, it could even be just sensing it, sensing demand from the market that pulls you in a certain direction, that pulls your business in a certain direction. And then why not double down on that, right? Your responsibility as a business leader is to be a revenue-seeking missile, and market pull is a great way of being and living up to that responsibility. Internal factors, strengths and weaknesses. That's pretty obvious. What are you strong at? What are you weak at? How many resources do you have? Which would be a strength, or maybe it could be a weakness, depending on the, if it's a lack of resources. And then strategy, how do you define that? The first one, since we're now on the how level, we're starting to be operational and actionable rather than inspirational and big picture. So the strategy in this case is defining who are you targeting and how are you prioritizing the targeting groups. It could be the size of the segment that you're targeting, their willingness to pay, their overall healthiness. It could be how fast they're growing, how easy to target they are. There's a plethora of ways of what you define on the strategy level. But the first one is, who are we building this for? Coming back to the example I mentioned earlier about Eternity, we were saying we're doing this for consumers and FMCG companies. So we were a marketplace, which is harder to build than a regular one-sided business. But that was our decision, for better or worse. And then you have to define the offer. You think about, what's the product that we're offering? What's the benefit? What's our unique selling points and the price point, the business model that we're going to be deploying here? In our case, it was, for consumers, we let them scan their grocery receipts, barcodes, give them alternative recommendations for stuff they bought based on what's called the Nutri-Score. You can think about that whatever you want if you know the Nutri-Score. And on the other side, we need some kind of dashboard for FMCG companies or services-based offering for FMCG companies where we help them run these marketing campaigns. And we're monetizing the FMCG companies through, for instance, a revenue share, right? And so then the last component here is the go-to-market strategy. Fundamentally, what you need here, since you've already defined who you're targeting and what you're offering them, all you need is what are the channels that I'm using, what are the tactics that I'm using, and what's the messaging, right? You want to be thinking about what am I telling these people. And now what you have at this point is, you know where you're heading, you know how you are going to realize your vision through your mission, and you have an action plan in your strategy where you know who you're targeting, what you're offering them, and how you're reaching them. That's a great basis to start a business already. And now comes the enablers. This is particularly true for large organizations, but it's also true for smaller orgs that are just getting started. You need certain roles in place and goals in place, right? You cannot have your team run around loosely and wildly on their own. Put in place OKRs, objectives and key results. I love the tool. Definitely recommend it for all levels and employees. It should be just used everywhere all the time. It's great for aligning expectations, to some degree performance management, although that's not the original purpose of it. The next one is processes and systems. This becomes particularly important as you're scaling. So for instance, from 1 million in revenue upwards, you just cannot maintain that run rate if you don't have a CRM. It's impossible unless you're selling multi-million-dollar deals and are in enterprise negotiations, then it may be possible. On top of that, you will need performance management for your employees. You will need communication systems. You will potentially also need change management. Don't underestimate the importance of change. When you change your vision, when you change your mission, when you change even your strategy, it can have unanticipated, and by that I mean effects that you didn't anticipate. It can have unanticipated effects for the entire org, and you want to make sure to establish a line of communication with your employees if you haven't done so already. I mean, it should be pretty obvious that you need that. And then ultimately, it's also a function of, based on what we're considering to do here, what are functions that we need in the business? Do we need sales and marketing / growth? Do we need to primarily focus on research and development? Are we focused like a buy and build private equity shop, and we only need an M&A team or an investment team. And then there are a couple of other functions that you most likely need, some of which may be more important depending on what the other pieces here are. But this is I guess this runs you through end to end, from how to set a North Star for your business, which is the vision, which will be important for your employees, your board, your investors, down to very nitty-gritty details of how you're actually enabling the strategy through specific capabilities that you're building as a business. Capital, for instance, is one that I could probably add here, that you also need to be thinking about, especially if you're a startup, but also as a large organization. The large organizations have as much investor relationship management to do as regular organizations or small organizations have to. Wouldn't underestimate that. Fantastic. All right, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. If you have questions, drop them in the comment section. I'll get back to you ASAP, promised. And if you enjoy the content, subscribe. You'll be in the loop when we publish new stuff. I'm working on exciting new content, so don't miss out. Have a great rest of your day and talk soon. Bye-bye.